Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jacqueline Dorsey of Lane Frontiers and I'll serve as your host today. I'm excited to bring to you today a short webinar on lean accounting facilitated by Darril Wilburn. Darril Wilburn was a leader in the development and implementation of some of Toyota Motor Manufacturing's highest profile leadership and development programs and is now a partner at Pancha.org. Darril is also co-author and editor of the book Toyota by Toyota. Please note that this session will be recorded if you want to refer back to it later. So for now, let me turn things over to Darril.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. I think I saw on the list of attendees that we have a few regions of the globe represented, so I thank you for taking the time out today to come and join us. Thanks to Lane Frontiers for inviting me to speak today. It's an honor to be working with you. For those of you who don't know me, here's a little bit more about my background and where I come from. Click here, sorry. I am a former Toyota guy, as mentioned. During my 7 years at Toyota, I was lucky enough to work at 3 locations. The Kentucky plant, which is the largest, the Texas plant, which was a startup experience, and also had a chance to work at the North American headquarters. Now, 3 locations in 7 years, I'm sure the question may come up, was it a pull system or a push system on that one? And honestly, I'm not quite sure. I hope it was a pull system, but I guess that's up to others to decide. I was originally hired in the Human Resources Department as a leadership coach, but was able to quickly move into other areas and learn some different functions. I had a chance to work on some cool projects as well, as mentioned. One of the projects was the Toyota Way 2001, which was our internal effort to codify our way, the Toyota Way, and standardize what we would teach about the way in all the global locations. And my job was to lead that function at Toyota Motor Manufacturing in Kentucky. After the Toyota Way 2001, as an organization, we asked ourselves the question, now what? It's one thing to have a set of principles and values that you want to align with, as outlined in the Toyota Way, but it's another thing to actually have your behaviors align with those principles. That's where the Toyota Business Practice came in. The Toyota Business Practice was a global initiative that I had a chance to be a part of from the beginning that answered the question, how do I show that I'm aligning my behaviors with the Toyota Way? Now, in its simplest form, the Toyota Business Practice, or TBP as we might call it, is problem solving. And we decided as an organization that every person in the organization shared a common job function. That's problem solver. Now, all the systems and tools that are associated with the Toyota production system have the primary function to either expose that we have a problem or to help us solve the problem that was exposed. So it makes sense that one of our common job functions would be problem solver. We'll talk about that a little bit more in our short time today. It's difficult to explain just how deeply this idea of problem solving is integrated into the Toyota culture. I was also honored to be a student of OMDD, the Operations Management Development Division. This is the internal TPS senseis at Toyota. Now, I may not have been the best student, but I'm probably one of the most grateful ones. I had and have so much to learn about TPS, but this is where I was introduced to it in its purest form. And I'm forever grateful to my patient teachers in OMDD. And in case you're wondering, that's Ken and Masa and Cindy. Those are you. Thank you so much for doing that for me. Now, currently, as mentioned before, I'm a part of an organization called Pancha. Pancha means origin or headquarters in Japanese. And most of the members of Pancha come from Toyota, which is regarded as the origin of modern lean systems. I had the opportunity to work with many different companies around the world, from manufacturing and non-manufacturing alike, from airports to government to candy makers. You know, it is a tough life when you have to go to work in a candy factory, I know. But it's another opportunity to see that most everything is a system and process, and And all of us are waiting for that candy that comes at the end, obviously. One of my favorite things to do is to spread the word regarding the lean and the Toyota principles as a frequent speaker. And I've been lucky enough to speak for the Harvard Business Review, for example, in Latin America, where there was a series, and several others around the world, including even, believe it or not, an Abu Dhabi talent conference a few years ago, and also lean conferences in Brazil, and the Netherlands, and Portugal, and the US. And it's amazing to see just the appetite for people wanting to learn more and more about lean and just how it can impact their organization. So it's one of my favorite things I get a chance to do. Now, I think about this topic of lean systems a lot in the work that I do, and I've seen the approach that many organizations take to lean implementation. Now, obviously, I compare that to how we did things at Toyota. Now, since I grew up professionally at Toyota, most of my mental models still come from there. It's still the best model I've seen of how lean can work when it's integrated into all parts of the organization. I've seen organizations take many different approaches to lean implementation. They all struggle with the same questions. Where do you start? And when do you start? How do you start? What's the best way? Sometimes we get pulled into more of a tool approach to starting. But the important thing is that we do start and we do begin to learn as much as we can. One of my colleagues, Samuel Barra, likes to say, the best time to start lean implementation has already passed. The second best time to start is today. And that's when we have to ask ourselves, are we ready? So one of the opportunities I had to learn how Toyota starts these functions in a new, maybe a greenfield organization, is when I was a part of the startup team in Texas. I had a chance to be a part of this opportunity when we developed the TPS culture with a workforce that was made up of only a small percentage of internal people. One of my responsibilities was to help orient the new to Toyota management team to Toyota, to expose them to the Toyota business practice and the Toyota way. Honestly, before this experience, I didn't really think much about how we developed a team and a culture from the very beginning. At the Kentucky plant, the culture and systems were already in place when I was hired. And my job, and really it's the job of everyone who was hired there, was to learn the standard ways and then help improve the standard again and again and again, and thus we get continuous improvement. For all of us, I think when we're hired into any company with established culture and systems, we may take it for granted. And certainly, I took the Toyota production system for granted when you're working inside it. It's kind of like the idea that fish discover water last. It's that when you're so ingrained in it, you don't always appreciate what you have around you. I think that's why some former Toyota folks struggle when they leave Toyota. They go to a new company, it's established systems, and it's difficult to see how and when and where to make the changes that move the organization closer to lean. The brownfield implementation is very difficult. Now, I have a lot of passion about this topic because I believe that the work systems we hire people into determine how successful they can be. If we put good people into bad systems and processes, the system will almost always win in the long run. People and organizations can still be successful, but it is too often in spite of the system. And people use their creativity and their innovation skills to work around the system, instead of using their creativity and innovation skills to improve the system. This is a key job of the leadership team, is to set the systems in place that allow people to be successful, to set the culture of continuous improvement so that people can be successful, then contribute to future improvement. Now, when we talk about lean systems, there's so many things we could discuss today. We could examine the different ways that work is launched into the system. We could look at Kanban and Conwhip systems. We could look at how we design work systems and cells and other pull systems. And we could look at the enterprise management system as well. Now, we're not going to have that much time today, obviously, to cover everything. So what I'd like to do is take a little time to talk at a high level about a few of my favorite examples of how lean systems interact with lean techniques and how sometimes we can overlook the connections. Now, one of the most common approaches that I see people taking when working in lean systems or implementing lean systems is to focus on tools. We can go to a workshop, we can read a book, learn the basics, and then we can go and implement. It's kind of like the things that we see in the top of this tree, the lean toolkit. Now, there's nothing wrong with a learn and do approach as long as we understand the risk associated with not connecting tools to an overall lean system. And it's also, we have to understand the risk associated with this spot placement of tools and not having everyone, especially the leadership team, committed to developing a culture of continuous improvement and respect for people. Implementing tools is really not that difficult, but it's managing and leading a connected system that is very difficult. How do these things work together? What happens when things don't go perfectly, which, by the way, as most of you know, is every day? So we learn the tools and techniques like 5S, like Kanban, value stream mapping, standardized work, PDCA. Of course, the list goes on and on. Now, we do this in order to get results. That's what we want. And why results? Well, we got to have those. I mean, that's what everybody's pushing us for. But when we just implement kind of a cafeteria style tools, picking a few that we think works or a few of our favorites, and they're not used correctly, sometimes we then blame the tool. Or sometimes we use them incorrectly and we get some result that we like, but it's not sustainable. But we keep using it, not really understanding what goes behind it. So one of the examples I like to use in this scenario is to think about how we many times implement and use 5S as a standalone tool and not thinking about it as a way of and thinking about it the way it connects to the other parts of the system. So these are some pictures from a recent Gemba walk at a company I was doing a workshop in. Now, before you judge, these aren't the after pictures of a 5S workshop. It was just an introductory workshop, and we were these are some pictures that we took on the Gemba walk before the workshop. I was actually with the leadership team during the day, learning about lean and Kaizen culture, and just sharing a few things about the way Pancha approaches the work. Before the Gemba walk, I was with the lean coordinator for the plant. You know, this person that's in charge of lean. We may have some lean coordinators online today, and maybe others listening later. But this has also been a struggle for me throughout my visits to different companies, is that, you know, we have this person sometimes who's given this enormous responsibility of being responsible for lean. And we know that in order for lean to really work, that everyone, starting with the CEO, should be responsible for lean. But anyway, he was walking me through the physical plant. He was also walking me through the timeline of lean implementation. And he mentioned that they have implemented 5S, but it is not sticking. It's not sustaining. Now, actually, like many of you, I've had this same walk and same talk many times. It seems to be a theme. People will say, oh, you should have seen it last week or last year. It was so good. All this is to say that many times, just a tool implementation won't stick. Now, as we're walking and talking and trying to understand more about their production system, actually learned a lot of really cool things, and they have many great practices already in place. Now, 5S was not one of those, but they were definitely taking steps along the journey. Now, the next day, when we were with the leadership team, we were doing a Kaizen workshop, and I was introducing them, as I said, to the Pancha approach. And you know, the day is generally going pretty well. I think we're learning a lot about each other. And at the end of the day, we wanted to take some time to implement some of the learning that we had. So I followed the lean coordinator on this trip out to the floor to look for some opportunities for Kaizen, and he knew of a group he thought we could work with that had some opportunities. And so we approached the work group and let them know what we were doing. We asked them questions about problems they're having and what kind of ideas they might have to improve things, and the standard stuff that we're all taught to ask. We spent about 90 minutes with the group, and we left after working with that group. We were able to implement maybe 3 Kaizens, and I thought that was pretty good. But my biggest learning was that we disrupted a work of an entire group for 90 minutes. And no buzzers went off. No one was asking where the group output was. There was no indication of any problem. How is this possible in a lean system? Well, in short, it's not possible. Now it was really clear why 5S was not being sustained. And we didn't actually do any Kaizens in the strictest sense of the word, since there obviously were no clear standards or standardized work in the strictest sense of the phrase. So going back to Ono's idea that no standards, no Kaizen, how were we able to really make any improvements in that kind of work environment? So the work not being connected to a pull system made it obvious why we're not being able to sustain 5S. Without a system pulling the work from the customer order to customer delivery, it didn't matter if we had 5S or 2S or 3S. Didn't matter if any of that was being practiced. The work process could be swimming in waste, and I could still meet the quote-unquote standard because that standard was so loose. Now, at the bottom of this tree, one way to approach this is to think about it from a principle-centered approach. The lean TPS principles can be shown in a couple of different ways. And on the right is a Pancha model based on the Toyota way. The main principles here are continuous improvement and respect. And inside, we look to balance courage and humility in order to truly Kaizen. As those 3 elements come together, we can actualize the culture of continuous improvement and respect. And we could spend a few days on these concepts, but obviously that's for another time. Now, the TPS operational principles are often expressed in the house visual as seen on the left. This is a common way organizations choose to visualize the components of lean, and I've seen many of these, and most are very similar. Now, if we think of our 5S example, again, we can imagine implementing 5S as a part of this system. 5S lives in the foundational aspects of standardization and visual management, and also lives in all of the house, but helps us understand why just-in-time can't be possible unless we have a good 5S condition. So I've asked many people the question, what is the purpose of 5S? And the range of answers I get vary from, well, it's a great way to develop teamwork. We can develop discipline for the team. We can maintain safety. We can ensure cleanliness or good housekeeping. All great outputs, all great results of a good 5S system. But honestly, if a lack of discipline and teamwork are your problems, then I can think of many better countermeasures to help them other than 5S. As in the picture examples before, when we use 5S as a disconnected tool, then I think it's actually cruel to use this as a way to develop lean discipline. People have to work so hard just to try and make the connection, and when the leader runs out of platitudes to answer the question, why do we need to do this? We're left with, because it's good for you, or because I say so, or it's the standard. Now, good housekeeping, safety, and discipline should always be a part of what we strive for. But let's not confuse it with the purpose of 5S. If we do, then we lose its importance in the TPS system. Now, we can surely connect this line of reasoning to all of the elements in the house and all of the lean tools and kind of walk through the same thinking of how does it connect to the system. And we know how it connects to having a good takt time planning system and having good flow and pool development. We learned that from our Give a Walk example earlier. But when we think about then the purpose of 5S is that we can become clear and we can quickly and easily visually determine a normal from an abnormal condition. And that's really the purpose of 5S. In a well-built system, well-designed system, I can't do my job without having a good 5S condition. But in a well-designed system, when things are not readily available for me, my job, my tools, if I have a bad 5S condition, then it's very difficult for me to actually work in that system. Now, here's an example of one of the big problems we face in lean implementation. It's the "we already do that" syndrome. So this is the first place, a picture of the first place I worked as a lean practitioner outside of Toyota. As these pictures indicate, they were swimming in the 7 waste. But do you know that what people had to look at every day when they came to work? They had to look at this, the lean house that they had. Now, they were convinced that they were already doing all of this. And how can they possibly do more? Now, unfortunately, just because we have a house does not mean we're practicing lean. Is it possible that the people who worked in this believed they were practicing lean? I hope not. I hope they understood that it was an attempt, but we're not quite reaching the ideal. And I hope that the picture doesn't indicate that the system was actually crushing the people. I hope we were trying to say that the people were the foundation of everything we did. But it's sometimes what happens in organizations is that we have the pictures on the wall, but we don't actually behave in the way that would indicate that. Now, as an example of implementing this in a non-manufacturing situation, this is a mortgage company where in a before condition, when we're trying to create a system of flow so that we could quickly and easily determine normal from abnormal, they had a situation where they were doing mortgage modifications, and they had one person who would actually go through a list of loans during the day and try to find the ones that they could work on. So maybe they had 100 in their queue, and they would try to find ones that were ready to work on that day. But as many of you remember during the financial meltdown, mortgage companies really struggled with how to get more productivity. So one of the things we looked at is how do we flow work through this system? So we actually redesigned the work to where we could create more of a cell type environment. We had a team leader, we had five people in the financial review position, we had 2 people in a decisioner position, we had 2 people in a follow-up position doing the same functions. And by the way, all of these people were also cross-trained so that they were able to go in and out of these positions. So once we created the flow and once we started to understand where the roadblocks were, we could start to actually use our problem-solving skills. And here's an example of one of the team leaders actually recording data from the first day of operations. Now you can see this is a very simple approach, but we wanted to know where we were. How are we doing? Were we ahead or were we behind? Or were we normal or were we abnormal? And so we were able to, in this case, by creating a flow in a non-manufacturing sense even, to increase their productivity by double, just by understanding where problems were occurring so that we could utilize the toolkit that we had from TPS to solve those problems. So in short, without flow, none of the tools will make sense. The system will not help us support our output unless we create a good flow system. Now, one of the experiences I talked about earlier was working in a plant startup. And it was interesting to see how people being onboarded into that situation sometimes thought, why are we hiring people so early? And this was maybe 2 years before startup, we had people come into the plant. And it was amazing to see how they had been maybe oriented before into other companies, and now how we were taking the time and the years of planning that went into getting people ready to be successful on day one. The system that they were provided on day one was already built to flow and was built from the wisdom of 75 years of experience. So a question you can ask yourselves, when we bring people into the organization, what kind of system are we bringing them into? Do they have to work around the system, or can they work within the system and be successful? And how does the work flow? That's a question we have to ask ourselves about our own systems. And one of the initial systems that we use within Toyota, and this is an excerpt from the Toyota Way culture from my friend Mike Kozeas, we call just the good people process. The inputs of having a good solid foundation of the Toyota values and working system. We use that to attract, to develop, engage, and then have people inspired to practice PDCA. Now, that great system, getting great people to work in a great system, looks a little more, in a smaller way, we look at just recruiting the multiple thousands. In Texas, we had maybe 50,000 people apply to work for 2,000 positions. But that people introduction system, that hiring system, was vital in order to get the right people working in the right system and the right processes, so that we could actually practice the Toyota Way every day. Now, some of those high-level systems that you may have seen before are things like Hoshin Kanri. That's a senior management way to help align the organization. Those systems help act on what the customer has asked from us, so that we can deliver to the customer high quality at the lowest cost, the shortest lead time. When we break that Hoshin down into the system, we see we can prevent a common firefighting example where people wait till the main KPIs are showing red, when really the function of the Hoshin system and the enterprise management system is to find those problems before they turn into big fires. We call that the fire prevention method. So Hoshin is a question we should ask ourselves about too. What is our process that we use? How do we determine where our precious limited resources need to go? We use our Hoshin system internally to both get results and to develop people. It's very important that we balance those two things out when we try to implement our strategic planning system. Now, from a middle management perspective, we incorporate the visual management system that we saw some examples of earlier, and 5S is a part of that. In order to enact the Hoshin or the strategic planning initiatives that we have from above. If we give middle management great skills around problem solving and a great management system that tells us when we have problems, then we're able to hit our goals. The visual management system we utilize should help us learn and should help us understand where our problems are and where we should put our precious limited resources. And again, these tools can be used not only in manufacturing settings, but in this case, you can see a recruitment board for a human resources function as they look at all the flow of the process, and are they red, are they green, are they yellow on those systems. So helping us learn quickly and easily. Are we ahead or behind? Are we normal or are we abnormal? Then for the front lines, we have standardized work that drives what we do every day so that we can truly Kaizen. In our example before in the company, we weren't able to Kaizen because we didn't have good standardized work. We want to be able to engage people in improving their processes, but we have to understand that standardization must come before the Kaizen. So a good question to ask ourselves again is, in our organization, do we have standardized work? Are we engaged in continuous improvement every day? And when I think about, I have an opportunity to take people to Japan a couple of times a year, and we go and visit very mature lean organizations, including Toyota. And one of the things they notice immediately when they see this orchestra of work happening on the floor is how engaged everyone is. And that engagement doesn't happen by accident. It is because these people are working in a well-designed system with clear standards that allows them to be successful and then allows them to improve the system that they've been hired into. Okay, that wraps it up for me today. Again, so many topics we could go into so much deeper, but I wanted to have an opportunity to share a few things just at a high level around how we approach lean system implementation and how it can help organizations. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. The email is on the front slide. The slides will be available for download on the website. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, Darril, thank you so much for facilitating our session today. For our listeners, if you're interested in learning more, Darril will actually be speaking at the Lean Accounting Summit held in San Antonio on August 25th through the 26th. So if you want to learn more, please visit www.leanaccountingsummit.com. We also want to offer a special discount code for everyone tuning in today. To receive a discount off the Lean Accounting Summit, please use the discount code WEBINAR for 10% off the summit price. Again, that's WEBINAR for 10% off the summit price. So to wrap up for today, I wanted to remind you all that today's webinar is being recorded. So look for an email following our time together for a link to the recording. And feel free to share this throughout your organization. So Darril, thanks again for facilitating, and thanks to each of you for participating in today's session. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.